welcome to day 2. So today we are going to talk about diet. And I know diet is like one of those controversial things, but so many people have seen benefits from changing diet, and that was a big first step for me. As I said yesterday, it's just one piece of this puzzle, but it's a big piece of the puzzle for a lot of people, and I think that it is definitely worth considering taking a look at if you haven't already done that. So I'm just going to talk about not any one particular diet, but kind of diet in general. So I know a lot of you are probably wanting to hear about the low histamine diet, and my feelings on the low histamine diet are that it is great as a tool to, as I said yesterday, to get those levels down to a manageable level. Sometimes we kind of go overboard with the histamines without realizing it, and when we are internally also releasing excess histamines with our mast cells degranulating with this disease, then that can build up and overwhelm our system. So the low histamine diet is certainly a really great tool to manage your symptoms, but I don't like the idea of the low histamine diet in terms of a long-term solution. It's a tool to get to know your body, and I like that. So elimination diets in general, they're not meant to be long-term, and I think that's a really common misconception. I know that I had that misconception for a really long time. So I started with a paleo diet, which is basically a general anti-inflammatory diet, cutting out a lot of processed foods and eating more whole foods. And I noticed a really big difference right off the bat. And then I also ended up doing the AIP diet, which is autoimmune protocol, to find like more of my unique trigger foods. And I think a big misconception about these diets is that they have to be long term, and same with the low histamine diet. So I tried these diets, and I did notice a lot of improvement in my symptoms, but I ended up hitting a brick wall, and I was, eating a lot of high histamine foods that I had started including when I started these anti-inflammatory diets. So, I started drinking the kombucha and the bone broth and, having my spinach and collagen and strawberry banana smoothie every morning, just a ton of histamines. And, I had heard of the low histamine diet. I'd heard people talk about histamine intolerance. I was like, well, that's not me, because I didn't want it to be, honestly. I didn't want to give up my leftovers, and I definitely did not want to give up my high histamine foods that I love. But when I did eventually, start taking note of these foods, so I didn't do like the strict 4-week elimination period when I did low histamine. I did not do that. I was already AIP, as my base. I had added back in some foods, but I just started to become more aware of what the high histamine foods are and trying to balance those out and look for patterns. So, you don't have to do that super strict elimination phase. Now, if you're really reactive, you might want to try that just to get your symptoms under control and get your levels to a place where, your bucket's not spilling over so much. But if your symptoms are fairly well controlled, I would start with a general anti-inflammatory diet, just eating those whole foods, focusing on that, versus doing a very strict low histamine diet. Especially, I find a lot of people do the low histamine diet, but they're still eating a lot of the processed inflammatory foods. So it doesn't pan out in the end. Like, you're still having symptoms because they're still eating these inflammatory foods. So in general, I would cut out, your grains, especially gluten. Gluten, I think, would be like the number one thing. Gluten, there's all kinds of issues with gluten. I know people think it's just trendy to be gluten-free, but there's a reason that a lot of people have gone that way, and it's because they notice big differences in their health, because gluten is such an inflammatory food. It's terrible for your gut, and it's sprayed with all kinds of nasty chemicals that contribute to that inflammation bucket. So you might notice a big difference if you cut out the gluten. Another common one is dairy. So gluten, dairy, soy, sugar's very inflammatory. Alcohol, of course. We all enjoy alcohol once in a while, I'm sure, but if you cut it out for a period of time and, make it an occasional treat, maybe. There are some lower histamine alcohols, they're still going to block your DAO production, and they're still, you know, not so great for your gut and things like that. But I know we gotta live a little, right? So you can have like tequila and vodka are good choices. But anyways, back to diet. So yeah, so eating a anti-inflammatory diet as your base diet, I think, is a really good idea for everyone. You know, staying away from the highly processed foods as much as you can, and then, you know, maybe tweaking and refining that a little bit. Like I said, just being aware of the higher histamine foods versus cutting them all out. And how you do it is up to you. You may want to do an elimination diet and go ahead and go low histamine completely for 4 to 6 weeks. Hopefully get those symptoms under control, and then slowly add back in foods and see how you do. And just remember that with the high histamine foods, it's not as much a food sensitivity as it is like your overall levels of histamine building up. So it's a little bit trickier to find. You gotta find like that balance. So for example, you know, maybe you reintroduce strawberries and you do okay with them. And then, you know, your next reintroduction is bananas, and you do okay with those. And then your next introduction is spinach, and you do okay with that. But then, you know, you decide to have your apples or your strawberry spinach banana smoothie, and you break up. You know, so it's how many histamines you're eating, you know, together. Or, you know, also like I said yesterday, you know, are you also feeling very stressed, you know, or are you fighting a virus, or, you know, something like that, something else that might be filling up your bucket. So it's really getting to know your body and getting to know how to find that balance. And I know it sounds like so overwhelming, but really, like, once you do it for a while, it just kind of becomes second nature. You just kind of start to put things together, and you get to know, you know, you get to know like what foods are high histamine, and, you know, kind of make these connections. For example, a good example would be a lot of people have an increase in symptoms around ovulation or the week before their period, you know, because of the hormonal fluctuations. That fills their bucket a little bit. So, you know, if you're very self-aware, you might say, okay, I know that I am ovulating, or I know that I am about to start my period and my symptoms usually get worse at this time. So maybe I'm going to avoid those histamine foods a little bit more during that period. So that might help. So anyway, so yeah, so in general, as I said, I recommend an anti-inflammatory type diet, being aware of those high histamine foods. Certainly if you do a low histamine diet, there are studies that do show that it is effective in symptom management. But just remember that it's a tool, and it's not forever. You know, you don't cut out the histamine foods forever. You're gonna add those back in slowly and see how you do. And it's a process. And like I said, there's all these other pieces of the puzzle too that you have to address. If you're not able to add those foods back in, then there's probably other things that need to be addressed. So tomorrow we are going to talk about environmental toxicants and how that might be contributing to your bucket overfilling. So I will see you back here tomorrow at the same time. Let me know if there's any questions. Go ahead and drop those in the comments. Okay.